3 weeks after I buried my husband, I attended my nephew's first birthday party. I almost didn't go. The thought of standing around smiling while people celebrated felt impossible. My grief was still fresh. Every morning I woke up expecting to hear my husband Ethan's voice, only to remember he was gone. But my mother insisted. "Family needs to stay together right now," she told me. So I forced myself to get dressed and drove to my younger sister Vanessa's house with a wrapped birthday gift sitting beside me. I had no idea that before the day was over, my sister would accuse my late husband of having an affair with her. My name is Claire. I'm 35 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought my life was stable. Then everything changed. Ethan and I met 12 years earlier at a charity gala. I was helping organize the event when I noticed a framed painting I'd fallen in love with. It showed the city skyline at sunset, glowing orange and gold across the water. I couldn't afford to bid on it. Apparently Ethan could. He won the auction. I remember trying not to look disappointed when the bidding closed. A few minutes later he walked over holding the painting. "You've been staring at this all evening," he said with a smile. Then he handed it to me. "I think it belongs with you." That was Ethan. Kind, observant, the type of person who remembered birthdays, tipped generously, and always treated strangers with respect. We had our first date the next night. 8 months later he proposed. A year after that we bought a beautiful historic home together. Life wasn't perfect. For years we tried to have children. Doctor appointments became part of our routine. Then came treatments, tests, procedures, disappointments. Eventually we accepted that parenthood wasn't going to happen for us. It hurt, but Ethan never let me feel incomplete. "We're still a family," he told me one night while we sat on our back porch. "Just because life looks different doesn't mean it's less beautiful." And somehow he made me believe it. We traveled, built careers, renovated our home room by room, created a life filled with memories instead of regrets. Meanwhile, my younger sister Vanessa lived very differently. She was 4 years younger and had always been the center of every drama. While I planned carefully, Vanessa acted impulsively. While I saved money, she spent it. While I worked toward goals, she chased excitement. Our parents constantly rescued her. Missed rent payment? They covered it. Lost another job? They helped. Bad breakup? They rushed in. It became a pattern. And unfortunately, Vanessa learned that someone would always save her. Over the years I noticed something else. She seemed oddly competitive with me. If I bought a new car, she suddenly needed one too. If I accomplished something professionally, she found a way to redirect attention back to herself. It was exhausting. Still, Ethan always encouraged me to maintain the relationship. "She's your sister," he would say. "Family matters." 2 years before Ethan died, Vanessa started dating a man named Ryan. Their relationship was chaotic from the beginning. Breakups, arguments, reconciliations, more arguments. Then, completely out of nowhere, she announced she was pregnant. I won't lie, that news was difficult for me. After everything Ethan and I had gone through, hearing that Vanessa had become pregnant by accident reopened old wounds. But I pushed those feelings aside. When her son Noah was born, I showed up at the hospital carrying flowers and gifts. I genuinely loved that little boy. What I didn't realize was that behind the scenes, something far more complicated was unfolding. And it would eventually explode at Noah's first birthday party. A party that would leave everyone in shock. Especially when Vanessa stood up in front of dozens of guests, pointed directly at me, and made a claim that would have destroyed my husband's reputation forever. But she made one critical mistake. She assumed I didn't know the truth. She couldn't have been more wrong. As Vanessa raised a glass and announced that her son was actually my late husband's child, the entire backyard went silent. Everyone expected me to break down, and said, I almost laughed. The atmosphere at Noah's first birthday party felt strange from the moment I arrived. At first, I blamed it on my grief. People often don't know how to act around someone who recently lost a spouse. Some guests avoided eye contact. Others offered awkward condolences before quickly changing the subject. But as the afternoon went on, I realized something else was happening. People kept looking at me, whispering, then suddenly stopping when I got close. It was unsettling. I spotted my parents sitting quietly at a picnic table. Even they seemed uncomfortable. My father stood and hugged me tightly. "I'm glad you came," he said. His voice sounded strained. "Of course I came," I replied. I glanced around the backyard. Blue balloons floated above the tables. Children ran across the grass. Music played softly from portable speakers. Everything looked normal. Yet something felt terribly wrong. About 30 minutes later, Vanessa finally appeared carrying Noah. She looked unusually confident, almost excited. Her makeup was flawless. Her smile seemed forced. And for some reason she barely acknowledged me. She placed Noah into his high chair and tapped a spoon against a glass. The sound cut through the conversations. Everyone turned toward her. "Thank you all for coming today," she announced. Guests smiled politely. Vanessa placed a hand on Noah's shoulder. "This year has been full of surprises." Several people exchanged nervous glances. My stomach tightened. Something inside me whispered that trouble was coming. Then Vanessa took a deep breath. "I've been hiding something important." The yard fell silent. Even the children seemed to stop moving. Vanessa looked directly at me. What she said next made several people gasp. "Noah isn't Ryan's son." My heart skipped a beat. She continued, "He's Ethan's." For a second I honestly thought I had misheard her. The world seemed to freeze around me. My late husband? Ethan? The man I'd been married to for 11 years? Vanessa was claiming that he was the father of her child. Murmurs erupted throughout the crowd. My mother covered her mouth. My father looked completely stunned. But Vanessa wasn't finished. According to her story, she and Ethan had secretly been involved for years. She claimed they had fallen in love behind my back. She claimed Noah was proof of their relationship. And then she reached into her purse. That's when things became even more unbelievable. She pulled out a document. "A few months ago," she said dramatically, "Ethan updated his will." The crowd stared. Vanessa unfolded the paper and held it up. "He wanted his son protected." Then she dropped the real bombshell. "The will states that Noah is entitled to half of Claire's house." Gasps spread through the yard. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. I could practically feel people waiting for my reaction. Some expected tears. Others expected screaming. A few looked eager for drama. But something unexpected happened. I felt laughter bubbling inside me. Not because anything was funny. Because the accusation was so absurd that it was almost ridiculous. Vanessa mistook my silence for shock. In reality, I was trying not to laugh directly in her face. I calmly held out my hand. 3 years earlier, Ethan and I had invited Vanessa over for dinner. At the time, she just started a new job and seemed determined to get her life together. The evening started pleasantly. We ate, talked, shared a bottle of wine. Everything seemed normal. Then I stepped away to take a work call from a client. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes. When I returned, something felt off. Vanessa was sitting unusually close to Ethan. Closer than before. She was laughing loudly, touching his arm every few seconds. At the time I ignored it. But later that night, Ethan sat beside me on our bed looking uncomfortable. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. Immediately my stomach tightened. He explained that while I was gone, Vanessa had been flirting with him. Nothing blatant enough to cause a scene. Just comments, suggestions, hints. Enough to make him uncomfortable. According to Ethan, she implied that he deserved someone who appreciated him more. Someone who understood him better. When he shut her down, she quickly claimed she was joking. I felt hurt. But unfortunately, I wasn't surprised. Vanessa had always struggled with boundaries. We agreed to let it go. Unfortunately, she didn't. Over the following months, the behavior continued. Random messages. Unnecessary compliments. Excuses to contact him. One afternoon she even showed up at his office without warning. Every single time, Ethan told me immediately. He never hid anything. Eventually he blocked her number entirely. That should have ended the problem. Instead, something unexpected happened. A few months later, Ethan developed a medical issue that required surgery. During consultations with specialists, additional concerns were discovered. After lengthy discussions with doctors, Ethan underwent another procedure during the same treatment, one that permanently prevented him from fathering children. It wasn't an easy decision, especially after everything we'd been through trying to start a family, but we made it together, and we kept it private, very private. The only people who knew were Ethan, myself, our doctors, and our attorney. Nobody else. Not our parents. Not our friends. And definitely not Vanessa. A few days after the procedure, Ethan surprised me with something strange. He scheduled a meeting with our family lawyer. I remember asking why. He gave me a serious look. "Because your sister worries me." I laughed. He didn't. "I'm serious, Claire." He explained that Vanessa's behavior had become increasingly concerning. He wanted documentation, records, protection, just in case. At the time I thought he was overreacting, but I went along with it. We saved messages, recorded incidents, updated legal documents, created a secure file containing everything. Then life moved on, or at least it seemed to. Now, sitting in my car after Noah's birthday party, I realized Ethan had been right all along. He had seen a danger I never fully recognized. And somehow, even after his death, he had prepared a way to protect me. The next morning I drove straight to the bank. Inside a secure deposit box waited documents that hadn't been touched in years. Documents that could destroy Vanessa's entire story. But what I found inside that box would reveal something even more shocking. Because Ethan hadn't just saved records. He had left me a message written specifically for the day I might need it. And after reading it, I knew Vanessa's nightmare was only beginning. Inside the deposit box were medical records, legal documents, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Ethan's handwriting. As I opened the letter, I discovered that my husband had predicted something terrifying years before it happened, and he had left behind everything needed to expose my sister. The morning after Noah's birthday party, I drove directly to the bank. I barely slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vanessa standing in front of our family and accusing Ethan of betraying me. The worst part wasn't the lie itself. It was hearing my husband's name dragged through the mud when he wasn't here to defend himself. As I entered the bank, the manager recognized me immediately. His expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss, Claire." I thanked him quietly. A few minutes later, he escorted me into a private room and handed over the contents of our safety deposit box. The box was exactly where Ethan had left it years ago, untouched, waiting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were several folders neatly organized and labeled in Ethan's handwriting. That alone nearly broke me. Even after his death, everything was arranged perfectly, just like him. I began sorting through the documents. The first folder contained legal paperwork. Ethan's official will. The real one. Properly witnessed. Properly notarized. Properly filed. It left everything to me. There was no mention of Noah. No mention of Vanessa. No secret inheritance. No hidden child. Exactly as I expected. The second folder contained medical records. Those records confirmed what I already knew. Years before Noah was conceived, Ethan had undergone a medical procedure that made biological fatherhood impossible. The dates were clear. The doctor's signatures were clear. The follow-up examinations were clear. Vanessa's entire story collapsed the moment those documents were presented. But that wasn't all. The third folder made my stomach drop. It contained screenshots, emails, notes, dates, descriptions of every inappropriate interaction Vanessa had ever attempted with Ethan. Years of documentation. Every uncomfortable message. Every unwanted advance. Every incident Ethan had carefully recorded. I couldn't believe how thorough he had been. And then I found something else. A sealed envelope. My name was written across the front in Ethan's familiar handwriting. For several seconds I simply stared at it. Then I opened it. Inside was a letter. The moment I started reading, tears filled my eyes. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, something has happened and you've needed to access these documents. I hope that's not the case. I hope we're old and gray together, laughing about life from our porch. But if circumstances are different, I need you to know something. I've always trusted your heart, sometimes more than your judgment. You see the best in people, even when they don't deserve it. It's one of the reasons I love you, but it's also why I worry. If anyone ever tries to take advantage of your kindness, I want you protected, especially when I'm not there to protect you myself. I stopped reading for a moment. The tears wouldn't stop. Felt like Ethan was sitting beside me, like he somehow knew exactly what was happening. The letter continued. He encouraged me to stand up for myself, to trust facts instead of emotions, to remember that protecting myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. When I finished reading, I carefully folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. Then I called our attorney. Within hours I was sitting across from him in his office. After reviewing everything, he shook his head. This isn't just a family dispute, he said. This is potential fraud. I showed him the fake will Vanessa had displayed at the party. He barely needed 2 minutes to identify multiple problems. Incorrect language, incorrect formatting, questionable signatures. Everything pointed toward forgery. But then he said something unexpected. I don't think money is the whole story. What do you mean? I asked. He leaned back thoughtfully. People don't usually risk this much unless they're desperate. That single sentence changed everything. Because if Vanessa was desperate enough to invent an affair, forge legal documents, and publicly attack my husband's reputation, then something bigger had to be happening behind the scenes. My attorney recommended hiring a private investigator, someone who could uncover what Vanessa wasn't telling us. First, I hesitated. She was still my sister, despite everything. But eventually I agreed, because I needed the truth. The investigator promised results within a few days. I expected debt, financial problems, maybe relationship troubles. What I didn't expect was discovering just how far Vanessa had already planned everything. Because while I was grieving my husband, she had been secretly preparing her scheme for weeks. And the evidence was worse than I could have imagined. 3 days later, the investigator placed a thick folder on the table. Inside were eviction notices, massive debts, and text messages that proved Vanessa had planned the entire fraud before Ethan's funeral was even over. And when I read what she wrote about me, I couldn't believe my eyes. 3 days later, I sat across from my attorney and the private investigator in a conference room. The thick folder resting on the table looked harmless enough. But according to the investigator, everything I needed to know about Vanessa's real motives was inside. I took a deep breath. Tell me. The investigator opened the file. Your sister is in serious financial trouble. That didn't surprise me. Vanessa had always struggled with money. But as he continued speaking, I realized the situation was far worse than I imagined. Her credit cards were maxed out. Multiple personal loans were overdue. Collection agencies were actively pursuing payment. Medical bills for Noah's treatments had piled up. And worst of all, she was facing eviction. According to the report, she hadn't paid rent in months. Unless she came up with a large amount of money quickly, she and Noah would lose their home. For a moment I felt sympathy. Despite everything, she was still my sister. Then the investigator slid several printed screenshots across the table. My sympathy disappeared. These are messages exchanged between Vanessa and one of her friends. I immediately recognized the name. The same friend who had greeted me at Noah's birthday party. The woman who had acted strangely the moment I arrived. My stomach tightened as I started reading. One message said, Claire has always had everything. The perfect husband, the beautiful house, The successful business. Another message followed. Maybe Ethan's death is finally my chance to get what I deserve. I stared at the words, unable to believe what I was reading. The next message was even worse. Once the will is finished, half that house could be mine. Another read. Noah deserves a better life, and honestly, Claire can afford it. The room felt colder. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't panic. This was planning. Careful planning. Weeks before the birthday party, Vanessa had already decided to target me. She had discussed forging documents. She had discussed using Noah. She had even discussed destroying Ethan's reputation, all while pretending to support me through my grief. The investigator wasn't finished. There is more. He placed another document on the table. According to his findings, Noah's biological father had abandoned Vanessa shortly after the baby was born. Child support payments were inconsistent. His background also contained several disturbing incidents that raised serious concerns. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Vanessa felt trapped, and instead of asking for help, she chose fraud. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted, angry, heartbroken, not because she needed help, because she never asked. Instead, she chose to attack the memory of the one person who had always treated her kindly. My attorney folded his hands. You have enough evidence to pursue criminal charges. The room fell silent. I already knew what that meant. Forgery, fraud, false claims, potential prison time. Legally, the case was strong. Morally, I wasn't sure what to do, because one image kept appearing in my mind. Noah, an innocent little boy. He hadn't created this mess. He hadn't forged documents. He hadn't told lies. He was simply caught in the middle. What are my options? I asked quietly. My attorney explained them carefully. I could press charges. Or, I could confront Vanessa privately and give her one chance to tell the truth herself. The decision weighed heavily on me. Part of me wanted justice. Part of me wanted revenge. But another part remembered Ethan, the man who always believed people deserved the opportunity to make things right. After hours of thinking, I made my choice. I called Vanessa. The moment she answered, I could hear confidence in her voice, almost arrogance. I was wondering when you'd call, she said. You've had time to think about the house? I looked down at the folder filled with evidence. She had absolutely no idea what was coming. No, I replied calmly. We need to talk. When? Tomorrow. At my house. There was a brief pause. Then she agreed. After hanging up, I stared out the window for several minutes. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another, because hidden inside my living room would be every piece of evidence needed to destroy her lies. The forged will, the medical records, the investigation, the messages, everything. And for the first time since Ethan's death, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The next afternoon, Vanessa walked into my house expecting to claim half of my property. Instead, she walked into an ambush of evidence that would completely shatter her story. And before the conversation ended, she would finally admit the truth. The next afternoon, Vanessa arrived exactly on time. She walked into my house looking confident. Too confident. For a moment, I wondered if she actually believed her own lies. Nice to see you, she said as she stepped inside. Her eyes briefly scanned the room. She probably expected paperwork transferring ownership. Maybe a settlement offer. Maybe even a check. What she didn't expect was the thick folder waiting on the coffee table. I motioned toward the chair across from me. Sit. Something in my voice made her hesitate. Still, she sat down. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I slid the first document across the table. The real will. Vanessa frowned. She picked it up and began reading. The confidence on her face immediately faded. I slid another document toward her. Then another. And another. Medical records. Legal paperwork. Investigation reports. Copies of messages. Every piece of evidence. One by one. By the time she reached the last page, she looked physically ill. The room was silent. Finally I spoke. Do you want to tell me the truth? Vanessa stared at the documents. Her hands were shaking. For the first time since Noah's birthday party, she looked frightened. Not angry. Not manipulative. Just frightened. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she whispered. I didn't respond. She lowered her head. Tears filled her eyes. Then everything came pouring out. The debt. The eviction notice. The medical bills. Ryan abandoning her. The fear of losing her home. The panic. The desperation. And finally, the lie. There was never an affair. The words hung in the air. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because Ethan's name had been cleared. Sadness because my own sister had forced things to reach this point. Did Ethan ever touch you? I asked. She immediately shook her head. No. Did Noah belong to Ethan? No. Did you forge the will? She closed her eyes. Yes. For a moment neither of us spoke. Years of jealousy, competition, resentment. Everything had finally led to this confession. I could report you. My voice remained calm. Vanessa nodded. I know. What you did was criminal. I know. You tried to destroy my marriage after Ethan was already gone. Tears rolled down her face. I know. For the first time in years she wasn't making excuses. She wasn't blaming anyone else. She was accepting responsibility. And strangely, that made the next decision even harder. Because despite everything, I saw something different. Not the jealous sister from my childhood. Not the manipulative woman from the birthday party. I saw a terrified mother who had run out of options and made terrible choices. That didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand them. I took a deep breath. I'm not pressing charges. Her head snapped upward. What? I'm not doing it. She looked completely stunned. Why? The answer came easily. Because Noah is innocent. Fresh tears filled her eyes. I continued. But there are conditions. She listened carefully. She would publicly admit the truth. She would apologize to our family. She would clear Ethan's name. She would attend therapy. She would work on rebuilding her life honestly. And if she ever attempted anything similar again, the agreement would end immediately. Vanessa agreed without hesitation. A few days later, our family gathered for dinner. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone knew something serious was about to happen. Vanessa stood first. Her hands trembled as she spoke. Then she told them everything. The affair was a lie. The will was fake. Noah wasn't Ethan's son. Every accusation had been fabricated. My parents sat in stunned silence. My mother cried. My father looked devastated. But for the first time, everyone finally knew the truth. Most importantly, Ethan's memory was restored. Months turned into a year. Life slowly moved forward.